Lila Carter had been stealing from supply wagons for 3 months, and she'd never been caught. Not until the morning, she lifted the canvas of Henderson Ranch's delivery wagon and found herself staring into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen. The man lying among the flour sacks wasn't supposed to be there. His clothes were too fine for a ranch hand, his boots too expensive, and that gold pocket watch catching the morning sunlight told a story of wealth that didn't belong in a supply wagon headed to the middle of nowhere. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs as she took in the stranger's face. He was young, maybe 22, with dark hair that looked like it had been combed with careful attention just hours before. But it was his hands that gave him away completely. Soft, clean. These weren't the hands of a man who'd spent his life working cattle or mending fences. These were the hands of someone who'd never known real work. "Please," he whispered, his voice rough with fever. "Don't scream." Lila should have run, should have called for help, should have done anything except what she actually did, which was climb into that wagon and let the canvas fall closed behind her. But desperation made people do foolish things, and Lila Carter was about as desperate as a person could get. Her father was dying, had been dying for months now, coughing up blood and growing thinner by the day. The doctor said it was consumption, said there was medicine that might help, but medicine cost money they didn't have. The Carter Ranch was failing, had been failing since her mother died 2 years ago. Lila did her best to keep things running, but she was 18 years old with 2 younger siblings depending on her and a father who could barely get out of bed most days. So she'd started taking things, just small items at first. A loaf of bread here, some salt pork there. Nothing that would be missed right away. She told herself it was borrowing, that she'd pay it all back someday when things got better. But things never got better, and the stealing had become a way of life. "Who are you?" she asked, keeping her voice low. The wagon driver would be back soon from his business in town. The stranger tried to sit up, but fell back with a groan. His forehead was burning with fever when Lila touched it, and his shirt was soaked with sweat. "My name is Harlan," he said. "I'm looking for work. Ranch work." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Men looking for ranch work didn't own gold pocket watches or wear shirts that fine. They didn't speak with the careful pronunciation of someone who'd been educated by expensive tutors. And they certainly didn't hide in supply wagons like criminals running from the law. "You're sick," Lila said, which was obvious but seemed like the safest thing to point out. "I'll be fine," Harlan replied, but his eyes were glassy and unfocused. "Just need to rest somewhere for a day or two." Lila heard voices outside. The wagon driver was coming back, probably with the ranch foreman. In about 30 seconds, this mysterious stranger would be discovered, and whatever story he was trying to tell would fall apart under questioning. She made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Can you walk?" she asked quickly. Harlan nodded, though he didn't look convinced. "Then follow me. Stay low and keep quiet." Lila slipped out of the wagon and looked around. The supply drop was happening behind the main Henderson Ranch house, but there was a path that led through some cottonwood trees toward the creek. If they could make it there without being seen, she could get him to her family's land. It was only 2 miles through rough country, but it might as well have been 100 miles for a man in his condition. "Now," she whispered. Harlan stumbled out of the wagon, and Lila caught his arm when he nearly fell. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle beneath that expensive shirt, but he was weak as a newborn calf. She half carried, half dragged him into the trees, just as the ranch foreman's voice echoed behind them. The walk to the Carter Ranch took over an hour. Harlan collapsed twice, and each time Lila thought about leaving him there. It would have been the smart thing to do. She didn't know this man, didn't know what kind of trouble he might bring to her family. But something in his eyes, some desperate hope that matched her own, kept her moving. Her family's ranch house was small and weathered, with a barn that needed new shingles and corrals that needed mending. It looked like what it was, the home of people who were barely scraping by. Lila helped Harlan into the barn and settled him in an empty stall, covering him with horse blankets. "I need to know who you really are," she said once he was lying down. and why you were hiding in that wagon. Harlan closed his eyes. For a moment, she thought he'd fallen asleep, but then he spoke. I'm running away, he said simply. From my family, from expectations I can't meet. That's not much of an answer. It's all I can give you right now. He opened his eyes and looked at her directly. But I can pay you for helping me. I have money. Lila felt her heart skip. Money could buy medicine for her father. Money could save their ranch. Money could change everything. How much money? She asked, hating herself for the question, but unable to stop it. Harlan reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a roll of bills that made Lila's eyes widen. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. Enough to solve every problem her family had. Where did you get this? She whispered. But Harlan had finally succumbed to the fever, his breathing deep and labored. Lila stared at the money in his hand, then at his face. Young and handsome and completely vulnerable. She could take that money and turn him over to whatever authorities were looking for him. She could solve all her problems with one simple betrayal. Instead, she pulled the horse blankets up to his shin and went to get water and clean rags. Whatever this man's story was, whatever trouble he'd brought to her doorstep, she was going to help him, even if it meant risking everything her family had left. For 3 days, Lila lived a double life. During the day, she helped her younger brother Liam with the cattle and tried to keep 12-year-old Amina from asking too many questions about why Lila kept disappearing to the barn with food and water. At night, she sat beside Harlan as his fever raged, cooling his burning skin with wet cloths and forcing broth between his lips when he was conscious enough to swallow. He talked in his sleep, mumbling about fathers and expectations and a woman named Victoria who made his skin crawl. Lila didn't understand most of it, but she understood enough to know that Harlan was running from more than just family disappointment. He was running from a life that felt like a prison. On the 4th morning, his fever finally broke. Lila found him sitting up in the stall, looking around with clear eyes for the first time since she'd brought him here. The expensive clothes were wrinkled and stained now, but even sick and disheveled, he was the most handsome man she'd ever seen. You stayed, he said, his voice hoarse but stronger. Where else would I go? This is my ranch. Lila tried to sound casual, but her heart was beating fast. In the lamplight, with his dark hair falling across his forehead, Harlan looked like something out of one of those romance novels the preacher's wife hid behind her Bible. You know what I meant. He struggled to stand, and Lila moved to help him without thinking. The moment her hand touched his arm, she felt that same electric shock that had hit her in the wagon. You could have turned me in, collected whatever reward they're offering. Lila stepped back quickly. How do you know there's a reward? Harlan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There's always a reward when someone like me goes missing. My father doesn't like to lose his property. Property, that's all I am to him. Something to be used for business deals and social connections. Harlan sat down heavily on a bale of hay. He's arranged a marriage for me, to a woman who sees dollar signs when she looks at me and nothing else. Lila felt a strange twist in her stomach. Maybe she's not as bad as you think. Victoria Ashford has the warmth of a rattlesnake and twice the venom. She told me at our engagement party that she expected me to keep any affairs discreet after we married, as long as I didn't embarrass her publicly. Harlan looked up at Lila. What kind of marriage is that? The kind that rich people have, Lila thought, but didn't say. Instead, she asked, so you just ran away? I tried to reason with my father first. Told him I wouldn't marry a woman I didn't love. He said love was a luxury that men in our position couldn't afford. Harlan's jaw tightened. He threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't go through with it. Said he'd make sure no decent family in the territory would hire me. Lila sat down on another hay bale, keeping careful distance between them. Maybe being cut off wouldn't be so bad. You could make your own way. Could I? Harlan held up his hands, and Lila saw the blisters that had formed from just a few days of helping her with small chores around the barn. Look at me. I don't know the first thing about real work. I've never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from or whether I'd have a roof over my head. You could learn. Lila said softly. I could teach you. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities that both of them felt but neither wanted to name. Lila busied herself checking his fever, trying to ignore how her pulse quickened when her fingers brushed his forehead. Lila, the way he said her name made her look up. Why are you helping me? Really? She could have told him about the money, about her father's medicine, about all the practical reasons she had for keeping him safe. Instead, she found herself saying, because I know what it's like to feel trapped. Over the following days, Harlan grew stronger, and Lila found excuses to spend more time in the barn. She taught him how to properly milk a cow, laughing when he jumped back the first time Bessie mooed. She showed him how to mend a bridle, guiding his soft hands with her work-roughened ones. In return, he shared stories of a world she'd never seen. Cities with electric lights and theaters, restaurants where a single meal cost more than her family spent on food in a month. But it was the quiet moments that undid her completely. The way he listened when she talked about her dreams of someday traveling beyond the county line. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like she was something precious he'd stumbled across. The way he insisted on reading to her from a book of poetry he'd had in his saddlebags, his educated voice making even simple words sound like music. You're too smart to be stuck on this ranch, he told her one evening as they sat watching the sunset from the barn doorway. They were sitting close enough that she could smell the soap he'd used to wash up, close enough to see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Smart doesn't matter much when you're poor, Lila replied. Smart doesn't pay for medicine or keep the bank from foreclosing. It could, Harlan said quietly, if you had the right opportunities. Lila felt that dangerous flutter in her chest again. What kind of opportunities? Before Harlan could answer, Liam's voice rang across the yard. Lila, you need to come quick. She jumped up, heart pounding with guilt and fear that they'd been discovered. But when she reached the house, she found Liam standing beside their father's bed, holding a crumpled piece of paper. What is it? Lila asked. Her father, pale and thin but more alert than he'd been in weeks, held up the paper with shaking hands. Reward notice, he wheezed. For information about a missing man. Harlan Blackwood III. Lila's blood turned to ice. Papa, I can explain. $500, her father continued, his eyes boring into hers. Enough to pay for the medicine. Enough to save the ranch. Lila looked back toward the barn, where Harlan was probably still sitting in the doorway, trusting her completely. $500. More money than her family had ever seen. Enough to solve every problem they had. Lila, her father said gently, I know you've been hiding someone in the barn. I may be sick, but I'm not blind. The reward notice fluttered in the evening breeze, and Lila realized her world was about to change forever. Again, Lila stared at the reward poster in her father's trembling hands, the words blurring as her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. Harlan Blackwood III, son of Samuel Blackwood, owner of the largest cattle empire in 3 territories. Last seen fleeing his engagement party to Victoria Ashford. $500 for information leading to his safe return. $500. Enough to buy her father's medicine and pay off the bank loan that threatened their ranch. Enough to send Liam and Amina to proper school in town. Enough to change their lives completely. Papa, Lila whispered, I can explain. Her father studied her face with eyes that had grown too wise through suffering. You care for him, he said. It wasn't a question. Lila's throat closed up. She'd never been good at lying, especially to her father. Yes, she managed. And he cares for you? I think so. Maybe. I don't know. Lila sank into the chair beside his bed. It doesn't matter anyway. Look at who he is, Papa. Look at who we are. Her father was quiet for a long moment. His breathing labored from the effort of talking. Finally, he said, Money changes things, Lila, but it doesn't change people. Not really. What do you mean? I mean that boy in our barn is still the same person whether his name is Harlan or Harlan Blackwood III. And you're still the same girl whether you're poor or rich. He reached out and took her hand with his cold, thin fingers. The question is, what kind of person are you? Lila pulled her hand away, anger flaring sudden and hot. What kind of person am I? I'm the kind who's been watching her father die slowly because we can't afford medicine. I'm the kind who steals food to keep her family from starving. I'm the kind who lies awake at night, wondering if we'll lose the ranch that's been in our family for 2 generations. She stood up abruptly. So forgive me if I'm not feeling particularly noble about turning down $500. Lila, her father's voice was gentle but firm. Come back here. She wanted to run, wanted to march straight out to the barn and tell Harlan to pack up and leave before she did something they'd both regret. Instead, she slowly returned to her father's bedside. I didn't raise you to be noble, her father said. I raised you to be honest, with others and with yourself. So tell me honestly, daughter, if you turn this boy in for the reward money, will you be able to live with yourself? The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Lila closed her eyes and imagined walking into town tomorrow, claiming the reward, watching as Harlan was dragged back to a life that made him miserable. She imagined the look in his eyes when he realized she betrayed him. She imagined having to live with that memory for the rest of her life, even if that life was comfortable and secure. No, she whispered, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Her father smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in months. Then you have your answer. Lila spent the rest of the night walking the fence line, trying to figure out what to do next. She couldn't turn Harlan in, but she also couldn't ignore her family's desperate situation. By dawn, she'd made a decision that felt both right and terrifying. She found Harlan grooming her horse in the barn, his movements still awkward but improving. He'd been practicing the things she'd taught him, and seeing his determination to learn made her heart ache. We need to talk, she said. Something in her tone made him stop brushing and turn to face her completely. What's wrong? Lila pulled the crumpled reward poster from her pocket and handed it to him. She watched his face go pale as he read it, watched his shoulders slump with defeat. So now you know, he said quietly. Harlan Blackwood III, heir to an empire built on other people's broken dreams. Is that really what you think of your father's business? Harlan laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father didn't get where he is by playing fair, Lila. He's bought judges, intimidated competitors, and forced small ranchers off their land when they couldn't pay their debts to him. The Blackwood Empire is built on fear as much as cattle. Lila felt sick. And you're his heir, his only heir, the son he trained from childhood to be just as ruthless as he is. Harlan crumpled the poster and threw it into the straw. Except I never learned that lesson very well. Too soft, he always said. Too much like my mother. What happened to your mother? She died when I was 10. Fell down the stairs, according to my father. But I remember the fights they used to have. I remember the bruises she tried to hide with powder and long sleeves. Harlan's jaw tightened. I swore I'd never become him. Lila stepped closer. You're nothing like him, aren't I? I've been living off his money my entire life. I've enjoyed the privileges that came from his methods, even if I didn't like thinking about where they came from. Harlan looked at her with eyes full of self-loathing. And now I've put you and your family in danger just by being here. What do you mean? If my father finds out you've been hiding me, he'll destroy your family. He'll call in any debts you owe, make sure no one will buy your cattle or sell you supplies. He'll ruin you completely, and he'll do it with a smile. Harlan grabbed her shoulders. Lila, you have to turn me in. Take the reward money and claim you just found me. It's the only way to protect your family. Lila looked into his eyes and saw fear, but not for himself. He was afraid for her, willing to sacrifice his own freedom to keep her safe. In that moment, she realized she wasn't just falling in love with Harlan Blackwood. She was already there, completely and hopelessly. No, she said firmly. Lila, please, be practical. Your father needs medicine. Your ranch needs money. I'm not worth destroying your family over. That's not your choice to make. Lila reached up and cupped his face in her hands. And you're wrong about not being worth it. Before she could lose her courage, She kissed him. It was her first real kiss, clumsy and desperate and perfect. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Lila," Harlan whispered against her forehead, "you don't understand what you're risking." "I understand perfectly." She stepped back, her decision made. "We're going to find another way. Together." But as Lila spoke those brave words, neither of them noticed the dust cloud on the horizon, growing larger by the minute. Samuel Blackwood was coming to collect his son, and he wasn't coming alone. The dust cloud Lila had spotted on the horizon resolved into 6 riders moving fast across the prairie. Even from a distance, she could tell these weren't ordinary cowboys. They rode with military precision, and the man leading them sat his horse like he owned everything he could see, which Lila realized with growing dread he probably did. "Harlan," she called, running toward the barn. "They're here." Harlan emerged from the shadows, took one look at the approaching riders, and went pale. "It's him. It's my father." Lila had imagined Samuel Blackwood as an older version of Harlan, but she'd been wrong. Where Harlan was lean and handsome, his father was broad and imposing. Where Harlan had kind eyes, Samuel Blackwood's were cold as winter steel. He dismounted near the house and walked toward them like a man who'd never been told no in his entire life. "Harlan," his voice carried across the yard, not loud, but somehow filling all the space around them. "You've led us quite a chase." Lila's father appeared in the doorway of the house, supported by Liam. Despite his illness, he straightened his shoulders and walked out to meet the cattle baron. Lila felt a surge of pride at her father's courage, even as she worried about his strength. "Mr. Blackwood," her father said with careful politeness, "I'm Johnny Carter. This is my ranch." Samuel Blackwood barely glanced at him. His attention was fixed on Harlan, who had stepped protectively in front of Lila. "Son, you've caused considerable trouble. Your fiancée is beside herself with worry." "Victoria is beside herself with embarrassment," Harlan corrected. "There's a difference. Regardless, you're coming home." Now, Samuel's gaze finally shifted to Lila, and she felt like a bug being examined under a magnifying glass. "This must be the girl who's been hiding you." Lila lifted her chin. "I'm Lila Carter, and nobody's been hiding anybody. Harlan came to us looking for work." Samuel smiled, but it was the kind of smile a snake might give a mouse. "Work? My son has never done a day's work in his life." "Have you, Harlan?" Lila saw the flush of shame on Harlan's face and felt anger flare in her chest. "He's been working here, learning, earning his keep." "How admirable." Samuel's tone suggested it was anything but. "I'm sure his efforts have been adequate." He turned back to Harlan. "Enough of this foolishness. Say goodbye to your new friends, and let's go home." "I'm not going back," Harlan said quietly. "I won't marry Victoria." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Samuel Blackwood's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. "I see. And what exactly do you plan to do instead? Farm? With these people?" He gestured dismissively at the Carter Ranch. "These people have shown me more kindness in 2 weeks than you have in 22 years, Harlan replied. Samuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Kindness? Is that what you call it?" He pulled out a leather wallet and counted out several bills. "Mr. Carter, I assume your son told you about the reward for information about Harlan. $500, I believe." Lila's father didn't move to take the money. "He did mention it." "Then you understand this has all been a business transaction. Your daughter saw an opportunity to profit from my son's temporary lapse in judgment." "Very smart of her, really." Samuel held out the money. "Here's your payment." "We don't want your money," Lila said. Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Don't you? I understand your father is quite ill. Consumption, isn't it? Terrible disease. Very expensive to treat." He looked around at the rundown ranch buildings, the patched fences, the obvious signs of poverty. Surely $500 will be welcome here. Lila felt the trap closing around them. Samuel Blackwood wasn't just offering money. He was demonstrating how much he knew about their situation, how vulnerable they were. "Furthermore," Samuel continued, "I hear the bank holds a significant loan on this property. Due soon, if I'm not mistaken. It would be unfortunate if that loan were to be called in early. He smiled again. Of course, as a business associate of the bank president, I might be able to help with that. For the right consideration. Lila's father straightened despite his weakness. Are you threatening us, Mr. Blackwood? Threatening? Not at all. I'm simply pointing out the reality of your situation. You're one missed payment away from losing everything. Your children would be homeless, and you. He shrugged. Well, the territorial poorhouse isn't known for its medical facilities. Lila watched her father's face crumble as the full weight of their situation hit him. They couldn't fight Samuel Blackwood. He had money, power, connections. He could destroy them with a word to the right people. Papa, she said quietly, it's okay. But Harlan stepped forward. No, it's not okay. He looked at his father with disgust. This is exactly why I can't come back. This is who you are. You see good people struggling to survive, and your first instinct is to use their desperation against them. I see people who need to learn their place, Samuel replied coldly, just as you need to learn yours. Lila felt something break inside her chest. The careful world she'd been building with Harlan was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Samuel Blackwood was right about one thing. They couldn't survive his displeasure. I'll come back, Harlan said suddenly. I'll marry Victoria and be the son you want me to be. But you leave the Carters alone. Completely alone. Harlan, no, Lila said, grabbing his arm. He turned to her, and she saw tears in his eyes. It's the only way to protect you. Samuel looked pleased. How touching. Yes, I think we can arrange that. As long as my son behaves himself, the Carters will be left in peace. He counted out more bills and placed them on a nearby fence post. Consider this compensation for your hospitality. Lila wanted to tell him where he could put his money, but her father was coughing again, blood speckling his handkerchief. They needed that money, and Samuel Blackwood knew it. 1 hour to say your goodbyes, Samuel announced. Then we leave. As he walked away to speak with his men, Lila turned to Harlan with desperation clawing at her throat. There has to be another way. Harlan took her hands in his. I wish there was, but my father isn't bluffing. He'll destroy your family if I don't go back. So that's it. You just give up. Harlan leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. Meet me at the old oak tree by the creek at midnight tomorrow. I have a plan, but I need time to set it up. Lila felt a spark of hope. What kind of plan? The kind that could change everything, Harlan said. If you're brave enough to trust me one more time. Lila slipped out of the house at 11:30, her heart pounding so hard she was sure it would wake the whole family. The night was clear and cold, with a full moon that made the prairie look like it was covered in silver dust. She'd barely slept since watching Harlan ride away with his father that afternoon, his shoulders rigid with defeat. The old oak tree by the creek had been her favorite hiding spot as a child, its massive trunk hollow enough to shelter in during storms. Now it felt like the most dangerous place in the world. If Samuel Blackwood had left men watching the ranch, she could be walking into a trap. But Harlan had asked her to trust him one more time, and despite everything, she did. She almost missed him in the shadows. Harlan stepped out from behind the tree, and Lila's breath caught. He'd changed back into his expensive clothes, but they looked different now. Less like costume pieces and more like armor for battle. You came, he said, relief clear in his voice. Did you think I wouldn't? Lila moved closer, studying his face in the moonlight. What's this plan of yours? Harlan pulled a leather satchel from behind the tree and opened it carefully. Inside were papers, documents tied with ribbon, and what looked like a small stack of photographs. Evidence, he said simply. Against my father. Lila picked up one of the photographs. Even in the dim light, she could see it showed cattle with different brands burned over the original marks. Stolen cattle? Among other things. I've been collecting this for 3 years, ever since I started suspecting what my father really was. Harlan's voice was bitter. Bills of sale for land that was never actually for sale. Correspondence with judges about dismissing cases against Blackwood interests. Records of debts that were never really owed but somehow got people thrown off their property. Lila felt her stomach turn as she looked through more documents. This is enough to put him in prison. It's enough to destroy everything he's built. The territorial government has been looking for evidence of corruption in the cattle industry for years. This would give them everything they need. Harlan took the papers back and closed the satchel. But using it means burning every bridge I have. Once this comes out, I can never go back to being Samuel Blackwood's son. Is that what you want? To go back? Harlan was quiet for a long moment, staring out across the moonlit prairie. 3 days ago, I would have said no without hesitation. But seeing what my father did to your family today, watching him use your desperation against you, he turned to face her. I realized I've been a coward, Lila. I've been running from who my father is instead of fighting against it. Lila felt something fierce and proud swell in her chest. So what's the plan? I take this evidence to the territorial marshal in Denver. Let him decide what to do with it. But once I do that, there's no going back. I'll lose my inheritance, my name, everything I've ever had. Harlan reached out and took her hand. And I'll probably have to leave the territory. My father has too many friends here, too many people who owe him favors. It won't be safe. Lila's heart sank. So you're still leaving? That's the part of the plan I need to discuss with you. Harlan squeezed her hand. Come with me. The words hung in the night air between them like a challenge. Lila stared at him, not sure she'd heard right. What? Come with me to Denver. We'll turn in the evidence together, and then we'll figure out what comes next. I have some money saved, enough to get us started somewhere new. California, maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere my father's reach doesn't extend. Lila pulled her hand away, taking a step back. Harlan, I can't just leave. My family needs me. My father is dying, and Liam and Amina are just children. Your father is dying whether you stay or go, Harlan said gently but firmly. And your brother and sister will be better off without the constant worry about money. My father left that compensation money, remember? It's enough to pay for your father's medicine and keep the ranch running. For how long? What happens when that money runs out? Harlan was quiet, and Lila realized he didn't have an answer for that. The truth was, her family would always be poor, would always struggle. One payment from Samuel Blackwood wouldn't change that fundamental reality. I know what I'm asking, Harlan said finally. I know it seems impossible, but Lila, what kind of life will you have here? Working yourself to death on a failing ranch, watching your father waste away, never having enough of anything. Lila felt tears burning her eyes. It's my life. It's my family. And you're my family now. Or you could be, if you let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. The words hit her like a physical blow. Lila had never imagined anyone would say something like that to her, would see her as worth choosing over everything else they'd ever known. I need time to think, she whispered. We don't have time. I have to leave tomorrow night, or my father will get suspicious. He's already wondering why I agreed to come back so easily. Harlan stepped closer. Lila, I love you. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Don't let fear make this decision for you. Lila looked at him, standing there in the moonlight, this man who was willing to give up everything for the chance to build something real with her. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to run away from all the responsibility and heartache that waited for her at home. But another part of her, the part that had been holding her family together for 2 years, couldn't imagine abandoning them now. If I don't go with you, she said slowly, what happens to us? Harlan's face crumpled. I don't know. I can't promise I'll be able to come back. And I can't ask you to wait for something that might never happen. Lila felt her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. So this is it? Either I abandon my family, or I lose you forever. I wish there was another way. But my father made it clear today that he'll destroy anyone who gets between him and what he wants. As long as I stay here, you and your family will never be safe. A sound in the distance made them both freeze. Hoofbeats coming fast across the prairie. Harlan grabbed the satchel in Lila's hand. "Someone's coming," he said. "We need to get you back to the house." But as they started to run, Lila realized it was too late. Lantern light was already visible in the distance, and she could hear Samuel Blackwood's voice carrying on the night air. He found them, and now everything was about to change. The barn fell silent except for the creak of old wood and the distant sound of wind through the canyon. Samuel Blackwood's hand trembled slightly as he held the gun, his weathered face a mask of fury and disbelief. Lila stood her ground, the leather satchel of evidence clutched against her chest like armor. "You think you're clever, girl?" Samuel's voice was low and dangerous. "You think this changes anything?" Harlan stepped closer to his father, his hands raised peacefully, but his voice steady. "It changes everything, and you know it. The territorial marshal has been looking for evidence of the cattle rustling for months. Lila has witnesses, documents, even a brand iron you used to alter markings." Lila's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice level. "That's not all I have, Mr. Blackwood." She reached into the satchel and withdrew a yellowed letter, its edges brittle with age. "I also have this." Samuel's face went ashen. "Where did you get that?" "Your late wife's sister gave it to me. She's been waiting 20 years for someone brave enough to use it." Lila unfolded the letter carefully. "It's addressed to the sheriff, written in your wife's hand the day before she died. She knew about the poison in her medicine, Samuel. She knew you were planning to kill her for her father's ranch." The gun wavered in Samuel's grip. Around them, the allies Lila had gathered, Sheriff Morrison, her father despite his illness, 3 ranch hands who'd witnessed Samuel's crimes, closed in slightly. Harlan reached out slowly and pushed his father's gun down. "It's over, father. You can face trial for murder and cattle rustling, lose everything and die in prison, or you can accept that I'm marrying Lila and she'll be your daughter-in-law." Samuel's laugh was bitter. "Daughter-in-law? A thief who steals from supply wagons. A woman who fed her starving family," Lila corrected, her chin lifting with pride. "A woman who nursed your son back to health when she could have turned him in for the reward money. A woman who's offering you a chance to keep your empire and your life. What are your terms?" Samuel's voice was defeated. Lila exchanged a look with Harlan, drawing strength from his encouraging nod. "Harlan remains your heir. We marry, and I take an active role in ranch operations. You provide medical care for my father and education for my siblings. Our family ranch becomes part of your holdings, but with full protection and fair treatment for all workers. And in return, the evidence disappears. Your secrets stay buried." "But Samuel," Lila's voice hardened, "any attempt to harm me, Harlan, or my family, and every document goes straight to the territorial marshal. I've made arrangements." Samuel studied her face for a long moment, and Lila saw a grudging respect flicker in his eyes. "You're tougher than you look, girl. Tougher than you thought a mere ranch girl could be." The old cattle baron slowly holstered his weapon. "Very well, you've won this round, but don't think marriage will make you equals. Blood and breeding matter." Harlan stepped forward, his voice firm with new authority. "Actually, father, that's where you're wrong. Lila just outmaneuvered the most powerful man in the territory. I'd say that proves her breeding perfectly." 3 weeks later, Lila stood in the small church wearing her mother's altered wedding dress, her father's steady hand on her arm despite his improved but still fragile health. The simple ceremony was attended by both families. Her siblings scrubbed clean and wearing new clothes, Samuel Blackwood in his finest suit maintaining a grudging dignity. Harlan waited at the altar in a black suit, his eyes never leaving hers as she walked down the aisle. When she reached him, he whispered, "You look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself for a man I found hiding in a wagon," she whispered back, earning a soft chuckle. Pastor Williams kept the ceremony brief, sensing the unusual tensions in the small gathering. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Harlan's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. At the simple reception in the church hall, Samuel approached Lila as she stood watching her siblings dance with the ranch hand's children. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. Lila turned to face him. "Yes, you did. But I understand why. In your world, women like me are invisible. Not invisible, just unexpected." He paused, then extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, Lila. I suspect you'll keep us all on our toes." She shook his hand firmly. "That's a promise, not a threat, Mr. Blackwood." 1 year later, Lila stood in the converted barn office, reviewing the ranch's expansion plans spread across the large oak desk. Through the window, she could see the new school building where her siblings attended classes with the other ranch children. Her father, his health greatly improved with proper medical care, was teaching young ranch hands to read in the evenings. Harlan entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside her papers. "The new herd arrived from Colorado. Best stock we've seen. Good. The breeding program should show results by next spring." Lila looked up from the ledgers, marveling at how natural this life had become. The desperate girl who'd stolen food from wagons seemed like someone from another lifetime. Harlan perched on the edge of the desk. "Samuel wants to discuss expanding into the Northern Territory. He's actually asking for your opinion." "Progress." Lila smiled. "Though I suspect he's finally realized I know more about ranching than he gave me credit for." Among other things, Harlan reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you ever regret that day you found me in a wagon?" Lila set down her pen and looked into the blue eyes that had changed her entire world. Around them, the converted barn office represented everything they'd built together. A partnership based on respect, love, and shared purpose rather than social expectations. "Every day," she said softly, then smiled. "I regret not finding you sooner." Harlan laughed and pulled her to her feet, spinning her around the office where maps and cattle records covered the walls. Through the window, the sun was setting over their thriving ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They had proven that true worth wasn't measured by birth or breeding, but by courage, character, and a willingness to fight for what mattered most. Lila Carter Blackwood had found her place in the world, not by accepting the limitations others try to place on her, but by refusing to accept them at all.